Howdy ladies and gents, my name is Thom Gibson, and recently me and my wife were able to pay off $120,000 of medical school loans in 4 years. The reason I'm making this video is because I want to give people a framework of what we did and how we did it to be able to pay off that amount in the time that we did it. And also to show that getting out of debt is doable and you don't have to be in debt forever, that there's this mentality of just being resolved to being in debt, and it doesn't have to be that way. So the big question is, how much were we making in that time? In the 4 years that we were paying off the loan, 3 of those years I was a teacher and Sarah was a medical resident. I was making about $45,000 a year and she was making about $55,000 a year, so bringing us to about $100,000 a year. I was also doing some voiceover work and doing some freelance video stuff, which gave me about $2,000 or $3,000 a year. So the most vital aspect of getting out of debt was having a plan, and a plan for money is called a budget. We just had to decide how we were going to spend that money before we actually spent it, instead of just spending money and then ending up at the end of the month just like, I don't know where that $4,000 went. So I used to use spreadsheets to do all of this, to keep track of everything, but it started getting pretty complicated once we were kind of having more expenses and trying to plan for different things. So I started using a tool, and still continue to use to this day, a tool called Goodbudget, where you can create these envelopes for all of your main expenses, and when you get paid, you put money into those envelopes. And so how do we budget? After taxes, we brought home about $7,000 a month. One of the first things that we did was we put about $3,000 a month towards that student loan. Sometimes it was a little bit less, sometimes it was a little bit more, depending on some other expenses, but that was our goal. And right after the loan envelope, we had a giving envelope, which included a tithe to our church, as well as any sort of giving that we would do, whether it was buying gifts for people or paying for a meal for someone else. And so that give envelope was the tithe and any money we were spending on other people, which is about 15%, so about $600. We knew that we wanted to try to be generous with our money, and we knew if we weren't developing those habits when we had less money, that it was unlikely that we would have those habits when she was a doctor making a lot more money. Next was our bills, which I counted as rent and cell phone bills and like subscriptions to Netflix and gym memberships, anything that was pretty much monthly. That totaled to about $2,000. We had a gas envelope, we had a groceries envelope, and we had an other mandatory envelope, which was things that maybe we didn't have an envelope for, but it was probably an essential thing, a run to Target for some things that we needed around the house or things like that. And we had an eat out / fun envelope, which was about $250 a month. In addition to those, we had a vacation envelope and a Christmas envelope. For vacation in the summer, we set a budget for about $4,000. And so we just divided that by 12, which was about $330 a month. And for Christmas, we wanted to have $400 for Christmas gifts. So we divided that by 12, and it was about $35 a month. And we also had an emergency fund with about $1,500 in it for any unexpected larger expenses. And so whenever we get paid, I kind of put all that money in the envelopes, and then twice a month, I would pull up our bank statements and then start pulling things in. All right, so I spent $25 in gas. I'm going to mark that as an expense, take that out of the gas envelope. We spent $200 these last 2 weeks on groceries. I'm going to go ahead and take that out of the grocery envelope. The loan envelope would just fill up and then get completely empty, whereas the other ones were a little bit more in flux. Sometimes we had a little bit left over at the end of the month. Sometimes it started to go a little bit into the red if you ended up pulling more money out of that envelope than you started with. So whenever we got paid the next month, I may put a little bit less towards the loan to kind of rebalance out some of those other envelopes that we spent a little bit more on. And the more you do it, the more you kind of recognize your trends and how much you're actually spending, the more accurate your budget will actually be, and you can actually make those tweaks. And so we did that for 3 years because Sarah was in residency for 3 years, and so our incomes pretty much stayed the same at that time. By the time she was done with those 3 years, we were down to about $35,000 from $120,000. She got a job in an outpatient clinic, and so with that boost in income, we were able to put a little bit more towards the loan and finish it in about 10 months. During that time, we didn't really have many emergencies. Sarah did have an accident where she totaled her previous RAV4, and we did not want a car payment. There wasn't room in our budget for a car payment. And so we got about $6,000 from insurance, and we found another RAV4 in pretty good condition for about $7,000. And so we used the insurance money plus $1,000 from the emergency fund to go ahead and just pay cash for it. The next month, we put $1,000 less towards the loan and then just refilled our emergency fund just in case anything else came up. We've been renting a house this entire time because we knew that buying a house would come with a lot of unforeseen expenses that we just weren't ready for. And we're going to continue to rent for a little while until we kind of build up a larger emergency fund that would cover about 3 months of expenses as well as a down payment on a house. Originally, the goal was to try to do this in 3 years and then be done by the end of residency. But with a little prodding from Sarah, we decided that we really wanted to go on vacation. We really wanted to spend the time while we were young to travel. We don't have any kids yet, and this was really the optimal time for it. And so we were okay that it pushed the payoff back about a year because we were able to have those experiences together and go on some really cool vacations while still paying off this debt. Regarding credit cards, we didn't have one for a long time, but 2 years ago, I got a Chase Sapphire card, which is a really good one if you want to get points for travel. I just made sure to pay it off at the end of every month, and we use those points for some of our vacations. We didn't spend extra with the credit card. We just used the credit card on things that we were already buying, like groceries or gas or anything like that. I'd only recommend that if you're pretty organized with your finances already and you can ensure that it gets paid off at the end of the month. Otherwise, they're going to throw in some interest and now you're paying more than what you would have paid and you're going further in debt. A more controversial part was that we were not contributing to our retirement during 3 of those 4 years, mainly because we wanted to be able to put as much money towards the loan as possible. After 3 years, when she got the pediatric outpatient job, we decided to go ahead and start contributing, even though we hadn't completely paid off the loans yet. But now that we are debt-free, there's a little bit more freedom to put 10 or 15% towards retirement and to build that up. I would say the hardest part is that $250 of fun money goes pretty quickly. There were times that friends would invite us out to eat and we'd just be like, well, we're just gonna have to stay home tonight. Or we'd eat at home before we went out to eat. So that way when we got there, we'd order maybe a salad or something small or share something. We had friends that would invite us to the movies, but we couldn't go because it'd be like $40 or something like that. And we were invited on bigger trips with friends to Lake Tahoe and other places. And we just couldn't go because we had already budgeted for a vacation in the summer and we didn't have anywhere else we could pull from to make that happen unless we pulled from the money that we were putting towards the loan. And so when you're really trying to vigorously get out of debt, you have to say no to a lot of things. And it's really about finding that balance that's right for you. For us, we could have tried to grit our teeth and not go on vacation and not go out to eat, but doing the math and saying, is this worth it to push this back 1 more year? For us, we said it was. For others, it might not be. Maybe they want to get out of debt as quickly as possible. So it's about finding that balance where you are aggressively paying off the debt, but still using a little bit on yourself. Best parts of being debt-free, I know for Sarah, one of her favorite things is to buy meals for friends and for family. Sometimes she would say, can we buy this meal for them? I'm like, we just bought a meal for somebody yesterday. She's much more generous than I am. But when we paid the last payment and we're debt-free, that was the first thing that she wanted to do, was to treat our friends and our families to a really nice dinner and to just enjoy giving. It's nice to be able to say yes to virtually any invite that we get from friends, whether it's just going to the movies or going to a nice restaurant. And for me, I started noticing really little things. Like, I really like Topo Chico mineral water. A 12 pack of the glass bottles is like $7. Before, it would be like, that's not essential. I mean, we can get bottled water if we want, but it's just gonna be regular bottled water. I'm not gonna pay $7 for these glass bottles of just mineral water. And just say like, yeah, this isn't essential, but I like it and I can get it now. And it's cool, it's nice. So again, I'm sharing all of this to kind of give you a framework. If you're in debt, which you likely are because most of America is in debt, hopefully this helps you see like it is possible to get out of debt and it doesn't take 20 years to do it. And hopefully it gives you an insight on how to develop a plan for yourself. Probably the biggest inspiration for getting out of debt was a guy named Dave Ramsey. He's got several books on finance. This one was the one that I had read called The Total Money Makeover that my dad got me right after I got out of college. And in this, he goes step by step on how to actually get out of debt. He calls it the baby steps. And then he's got a podcast where he fields answers that people have about money and getting out of debt. And then he has people come on and they share these stories on how much they were in debt and how long it took and how it feels to be debt free. And so I would listen to the podcast every once in a while and it was just like, okay, we can do this. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We can finish this up. We didn't follow all of his advice to the T, but his guidelines gave us a framework on how to actually do it. I also mentioned earlier that I used and continue to use a tool called Goodbudget. And what's really cool is like I've logged every single expense on there. And so I could say how much money I've spent on McDonald's in the last 4 years. You might be saying, why are you spending any money at McDonald's? I love McDonald's. Goodbudget also has a podcast called The Goodbudget Way, which I'll link in the description, which is all about setting up and maintaining a budget and getting out of debt and being in control of your money. Goodbudget isn't paying me to say any of this about the video. I do have a relationship with some of the people there. Once they found out that I was using Goodbudget with my students in my classroom economy, they were super excited about it. And then I let them know I was making this video and telling people how I've used Goodbudget and letting people know about the Goodbudget Way podcast. And they wanted to share this video and some of the other work that I'm doing in my classroom with their audience. And so just for full disclosure, the extent of our partnership is me talking about how I've used Goodbudget in the last few years and them sharing some of my work with their audience. So let me know if you have any questions about budgeting or getting out of debt or working with money. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Thom Gibson and I hope you learned something today. Oh man, panda arm.